Nice to see so many people here. Today we'll be talking about the Trinity of Trust. We are... he's getting his battery changed. And also welcome to all the people online. Really happy to have you there. I have no idea how many there are. But be sure to also ask questions, because the person assisting us is going to make sure that they reach this room as well. Søren, introduce yourself.
I will. Can you hear me?
Does it work?
I don't think... Oh, yeah!
Excellent.
Hoorah! Yeah, so my name is Søren. I'm a manager. I'm head of software testing at a company called Agile in Denmark.
And my name is Vincent Wijnen, and I work as an automation consultant for Society Netherlands. And during this story, we'll be represented by these two, and you'll immediately notice a small defect, because when I created these, I didn't know yet that I was going to be losing my beard in the time travel crisis that we had 2 days ago, but the green one is me, right? Just without the beard. And finally, just so you know, because people like to take pictures of slides, and we do use some animations, there's like a little black camera on the bottom right corner. If you see that one, it's done with the animations, so you have the entire slide. It's a little service to you from us. So.
Yeah, so. Vincent, how you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I am.
Because I feel that you're not quite on top of everything.
No, but I'll get back there. It's okay. No worries.
You sure?
I am sure.
Okay.
Excellent. I think that shows a little bit of the problem with trust, because that guy's my manager, and I wasn't actually feeling all that fine. I'm, to be honest, quite tired. It's been a busy day, a lot of work. 6th session in a row, but still, he's my manager. And, you know, I'm not necessarily feeling comfortable talking to him, because even though he says he's always there for me, that's what he says, he's still also the guy that decides on my pay rise.
Yeah, I noticed. He wasn't quite frank with me. There's something wrong. I can sense that. And I'm in a company where we very much rely on trustful relationships. That's a key value, actually, at our company. That's something that I, as a manager, really try to live up to, those trustful relationships. So I want to build trust. I want to build trust to all my colleagues. They're not my employees, they're my colleagues. See the difference? So it puzzles me that Vincent doesn't want to talk to me about whatever that is that possibly troubles him. But actually, I also know why he doesn't want to do that. Because I'm a manager, and like Vincent just said, I actually have the power. I have the power to decide how much money he's going to earn every month, whether he's actually going to work with us, if he's going to be promoted, get a pay raise, whatever. So I can do that in 2 ways. I can be the white knight, the gentle one, the one that I'm actually trying to be, the one that builds relationships upon trust. But I can also be a black knight. And who can actually see what's underneath the suit? So I could be the one where, like Vincent assumed, I could be the one that turns everything that he says against him. Be the one with the power, with the sword, that will cut him down if he says anything that doesn't feel good or right to me.
I always like to say is not maybe the best way to say it, but I always say, you know, I'm not crying on the shoulder that also decides my salary raise, because that's risky. And that means that there's a little issue in trust, and that's what we're going to be investigating during this talk. So we're going to start with a little theory about how that trust actually works. And of course, when you want to know how something works, the first thing you do is you find a definition. So we did that too. And we have a definition that basically says is that you either believe that somebody is good and they will not harm you, or that they are safe and reliable. And that's the thing. A metaphor you could easily use for power is, for instance, a sword or a gun. Of course, it's really good if that sword is used to defend you, but if the situation changes and you don't have control over the entire situation, suddenly that sword might be used against you. And that can be a bit risky. And from that sense, it's interesting to go into how trust works in different contexts and also some of the components that it consists of.
So one thing that we're looking into here is psychological safety. Psychological safety is something that's been talked a lot about for the last many years, and it's something that's super, super important to have in a company if you want to establish this kind of trust. So what you typically see is that if you're in an environment with high psychological safety, you will almost always also have a high level of trust between all colleagues. Now, if you have low level of psychological safety, you will probably also have a low level of trust. You will not go to your manager with your problems because you don't know what's coming back from that.
Yeah, and it might mean that if I say that I feel a little overwhelmed, they think, oh no, we have to take care of this person, but they might also think, are they capable enough and maybe they should be replaced? You don't know until you ask. And also a good thing to look at is how the environment deals with the concept of trust. And as a consultant, I've visited lots of companies in the 17 years I've been doing this work. And I always look for a subtle difference in the way that a company communicates about what they want from us as employees. And some companies are really explicit with, they want the environment to be safe. And for instance, you see little posters in the bathroom that tell you that if you're not feeling right, there's always somebody to talk to. You see that companies build structures with confidential people that you can actually go to. And these things are very explicitly communicated. But you also get, I'm sure you can imagine these town halls, where all the population, all the people are herded into a big room and then the manager talks and it's about results and it's about numbers. And I've even been at a client where I was part of such a meeting and I was really pleased that it didn't concern me because they literally said, you know, if the results don't improve, we are not sure that all of you are going to be in this room in a few years. That's a different way of communicating to the population, and it also tells you something about how these managers think about us, and it really made them for me, feel really unsafe. And also, of course, since I was working in the teams, you know, I hear the whispering in the teams after that meeting was over, and it wasn't good.
So a third thing here is power balance. Now, I heard, who was one of the vendors out here? Was it Oos? That had no managers. They were all just colleagues. Well, at my company, we have a subsidiary. They work from the same structure. It's a very big company, but still they have no managers. Well, they have CXO levels, but that's because by law, they have to have these people that are in charge. But basically, they're all just colleagues. There are no managers. They're self-managing teams. Now, in that situation, they're all the knights around the round table. They don't refer to anyone. They manage everything themselves. In opposition to that, we have the small kingdoms. The organization that is super hierarchical, with all the small kingdoms, all the small kings that wants to rule their kingdom. In those situations, you again often have very, very low levels of trust. So trust, now we talked very much about the interrelationship between employee and manager. But it's not just that. It's also a question about culture. So a disclaimer at this moment, depending on the culture in which you live, or the culture of your organization, this may also have an impact on your level of trust. So there's a Dutch psychologist who has made up these 6 cultural dimensions called Hofstede's. I would say that you should look him up. We're not going through all these. That would take forever. It would be a very long talk. But these 6 dimensions tells a lot about what impacts these different cultural dimensions. And depending on where you're on that, it might be easier or harder to implement certain level of trust in your organization. So we're coming up with a solution. It might not suit everyone, but we're trying.
So, the Trinity of Trust. We've talked about how trust works. We've also done a little play about how it works between employees and explored the concept a little further. So let's look at at one way that we are trying to solve it. And in order to frame that, let's look at all the pressure that's on the people that are working for all our companies. And that consists of a few parts. We want to highlight some. First is the expectations. And what you find is that every human is surrounded by a lot of people, your manager, your colleagues, your friends, you have your desires, you have social media is also a factor these days. And these things put a lot of pressure on people. People are more than ever quite keenly aware of what others want from them and are also much more influenced by it. And we notice that especially in the younger generation. I work a lot with the young professionals that enter our company, and my company's over 2,500 people, so that's a lot of young professionals coming in each month. And I notice these things happening quite clearly. So they are under pressure of all these expectations, and sometimes you might even ask, is that really the expectations from the people around them, or do they put them onto themselves? But they are there, and they do have a large effect.
So, the expectations, that's very much also your own perception of your expectation. Something different is the control. Again, this may be a perception, but it also may become very, very real. So, you're not in control very much, actually, because a lot of other people, organizations around you are in control of you. If you have family and friends, there's some sort of control over you. You cannot just do whatever you like at any point of time. You have obligations. If you look at your team, if you're part of a team, you probably have some task to solve, something to deliver. You have a role in that. That also makes your team take partly control over you. Then there's a company. Like Vincent said earlier, all the KPIs and stuff like that. There's something that you have to live up to. Again, that's a level of control from the company. Finally, if you're at a consultant or are a consultant, you will probably also have a client. Also, that client expects something from you. They also have some kind of control over you. They're paying for you, so they want you to deliver. So all this gathered together means that, of course, you have control over your own life. But there are so many other factors that count in towards this control.
So that means we get stressed and that we need to talk to people. And what you really see is, you could talk to your manager, because a good thing about management is they have the power to change things. So that could work. But it's also potentially unsafe. Because if you say, this isn't working, and they might, under that beautiful suit is a black knight, for instance, then the results might not be what you expect. You can also turn to friends and family, and they generally, I hope for everyone, that they care and that they love you and that they are interested to hear what you have to say, but they don't know the context. A lot of my friends are not in the same field of expertise, so if I talk about dealing with expectations as a senior consultant, they will not be able to relate, and sometimes I do need them to understand. And that could lead, and that's something that we are seeing, that stress is pretty hard to process. And that's leading us into some very troubling statistics.
Yeah, so it's not only what we experience in our daily life. This is a graph that shows the sick leave over years in the Netherlands. And as you can see, well, you could look at the numbers and say, wow, they're not that big. But if you look at the progression, it's actually quite high. Of course, there was a peak due to something a couple of years back. But besides that, it's going up. And that's really, really not a good thing. Now, what's even worse than that is that if you look at why people are on sick leave, so if you look at this graph up here and look at the numbers down here, those are the age groups. And if you look at the younger age groups, and yellow represents psychological, mental issues. So a lot of the young people that are on sick leave are that due to mental issues. That being anxiety, depression, stress, or stress-related anxiety, depression, and whatever. And it's so clear that the older people get, the less sick leave is there because of that. So for some reason, and that might be coming back to the expectations and control, younger people tend to have more sick leave due to mental illnesses. Not long ago, Gallup made a big survey all around the world and came up with some numbers that to us were simply devastating. It shows that in Europe, 37% of everyone experience stress on a daily basis. 37%. That's every 2.5 person sitting in here experience stress every single day. And if we look at the ages, well, if you're younger than 35, you're more prone to that than if you're older. If we go outside of Europe, look at US and Canada, the picture's even worse. Super scary. It's almost 60% of the people, the young professionals, that are experiencing stress every single day. Now, what does it mean? Well, it's, of course, gives a lot of personal issues, but it also has an impact on the economy. It has an impact on our businesses. It is so that if you look at how much money companies are losing, there was a survey in Denmark a few years back, shows that the Danish companies are losing 7.5 billion euros every single year because of stress-related sick leave. And what this graph here shows us is that before going down with stress, you have a slight increase in production. But after that, it plummets quite a lot. And as the graph shows, you only recover very, very slowly. And you will probably never get up to 100%. So going back to the top, if we have so many young people that are on sick leave due to stress, our workforce capacity will be lower over the next many years. Unless we do something.
And that's what we're trying to, suggest at least. So normally if you look at the relationship you have as an employee within your company, it's just a relationship to your manager. And as we said, that relationship is risky, and there's probably only limited trust going on there. So what we are suggesting is something that I've actually been doing for the past 4.5 years. I've started working as a trustee. And that the trustee is somebody that's part of the same group. So I'm also a regular employee just like everybody else. I don't have any power. So if somebody tells me something, I literally have no mandate to act upon that. And also, since I'm also just a professional, I understand what they're coming from because I'm literally going through the exact same thing. You know, I also have to go to clients and listen to my manager, listen to the client's manager, blah, blah, blah. That's the stuff I go through every day just as well. And that really changes the way that trust works in such a relationship. However, I also have a relationship to management. And this relationship, it has what I call a signaling relationship. So I do listen to what the people are saying, and sometimes I hear something that I find troubling. And then I can say, you know, I do think you need to talk with your manager about this. And then I always ask for permission, and if they do, I never share the content. So I have already a few times gone to their manager and say, hey, you need to talk to this person. They're like, oh, why, really, what's going on? Talk to them. You'll find out. Yeah, but I want to know what's the problem. No, just talk to them for that. Because I'm not sharing any information because they can do it themselves. And it really lowers the barrier for people to go to their manager because they've already talked about it. I'm a senior consultant in my company, so I've worked there for really long, so I also know how the processes are going, and I kind of have a feeling for what you can say and can't say, so they can already reflect on that with me. So when I say, all right, this is something you need to talk about with your manager, then I find that they trust me, and it is much easier for me to set up that relationship. And that's what we call the Trinity of Trust. So what we suggest is adding somebody into this relationship to circumvent the fact that the relationship with a manager is potentially risky. Again, potentially risky. For a lot of people, that's enough. But a system like this is, of course, when you do this in a company, it always exists in an ecosystem. And that's the final chapter, what we want to talk about. Because, you know, if you do not shape some things in the ecosystem, an initiative like this is going to be very hard to set up.
So if you look at what we established as a trustability scale, you have the manager, who can be a trustee but is unlikely to be. You have, and when we here say other employees, it could be sales reps, other people not close to you or at the same level. You could have something like business partners, HR business partners. In my company, we have them as trustees, works very well, but it may not in other companies. Union representatives. Yeah, if you're in a union and you have a union representative, not everyone does. And again, the union representative may have an agenda. So actually, the one we're left with is the employee trustee, the one that Vincent represents. So what does that give us? Well, like just established, we have the manager, we have the employee, a single line of communication and trust. What we want to establish is actually a safety net. We want to make sure that an employee has someone else to go to. Not just a manager. Manager will probably at some point be part of a solution if it's necessary. But there are so many other people. One of them could be the trustee. This will provide a safety net. So in an ideal organization, what we would like to have are, of course, managers that more looks at the companies as a company full of colleagues, not managers and employees. So they try to establish this relationship. There might although still be that black night once in a while in between. We have all the employees. And then we have the trustees, the people that everyone can go to and talk to, those who does not have an agenda, those who do not have a power, but those who will listen to you. They may not have the solution, but they can listen and they can take a problem further if it's necessary. And the way that works is what we try to explain here. What we have is obviously quite a troubled employee, really having a rainy day here. That employee might go to another person to say, hey, I'm really feeling down today, I have a problem with this and that. But the person may also not do that. And if that person, obviously, like at the beginning of our talk, I said to Vincent, hey, you look troubled. If someone else sees that, can go to that person and say, hey, you look troubled, you want to talk about it, and they still refuse, they could actually go to the employee, go to the trustee. The same goes for the manager. If the manager sees an employee that looks troubled, but don't want to talk to that person, they can go to the trustee for a chat, to have that conversation.
And that's what's starting to happen more and more. So sometimes people come to me directly and say, hey, I just want to talk about something. But 2 weeks ago, actually, I talked to a colleague that I know quite well, and she told me that she was in the elevator with a colleague at 11 in the morning, and she said, I swear I smelled alcohol. That's something that happens, and people generally don't go to work, intoxicated because they enjoy it. There's something else happening, and these kind of signals, you can imagine if you just pass it on to the manager, that can also have really bad effects. So I pick up these signals, and what I generally try to do is then just schedule a meeting. I often just tell them, hey, I heard your name in the hallways, and I thought it was time for it, to get to know each other, because I'm in the company for a long time, so people generally don't find me suspicious. Yeah, so, and I'm not a manager anyway, so I just, I meet up with people all the time. I do a lot of training, I do a lot of coaching, etc. So it's quite normal for me to talk to a lot of people, and I meet up with them. And also, sometimes a manager tells me, I have this employee, I have a feeling exactly what Søren described. I have the feeling there's something wrong, but they're not telling me. Maybe you can have a chat with them. And then I do. And the last thing I do is either I report to them, I talk to them, it's fine, nothing to worry about, and management generally trusts me in that, or I can tell them, you maybe need to have a chat with them without spilling any of the beans. That's up to the troubled employee themselves. And in the situation where I really encounter something that I think is really bad, inappropriate behavior, or very unethical things happening at a client, for instance, I could also go to HR. Thankfully, I've never had to do that yet, but I have been close to doing so twice already. So that's something that also really happens. This also means that it's quite a demanding job. And I think it's good to list a few of the requirements that we think surround the trustee. So if we put them in the middle, you have two types of requirements. The first is organizational. I'm not going to go through all of these in detail, but most of them have already been talked about, right? They cannot be part of management or have any kind of power. It's nice if they are known, like through a list or something, so that people actually know, hey, this is a person I can talk to. And even though, the funny thing is, we already have that in our company. We have like confidential people. But for instance, in the department, which my department is around 600 people, there's one of them who's also a career manager, so also a unit manager. And also a middle-aged guy, white guy of 55. So if you are a young female employee and you've encountered something really bad with one of those, you're definitely not going to that one. So, there's stuff happening there. I also really like the middle one. I don't solve problems. I don't have any power. Neither do I want to, but I facilitate the solution of power. I know the organization, so if they need something, I can usually very accurately tell them where to go, what to ask for, and I can even help them initiate it. And the other side is the personal one, which is of course very important for me. And I think the most important there is the second one. It's what we call the airplane rule. And some of you who've flown in might have heard that. Always put on your own oxygen mask first, and then the one for others. I've had the situation where, for instance, on a Friday, I already had a whole week of work, and I had 2 different colleagues in Teams crying, talking about a lot of stuff that I also empathize with, and then you're just done. And the next week, preferably, you don't want any of those, because that's really hard. So it's very important for me to then sometimes also just shut the door and say, I understand, but I'm unavailable for now because I'm trying to breathe through my own oxygen mask. And also, I think the unconditional positive regard. I have no interest in what's happening to them other than listening. So I'm not judging them in any way. I can give them advice, but I'm always positive. If it's their experience, it's true. because you can't argue with somebody's experience. And this makes it a very challenging job, but also a very interesting one that I think delivers a lot of value to my colleagues. So, to summarize.
Yes. We looked at the statistics. Stress levels are going up, especially for young people. Another thing here is not just the stress levels, it's the engagement. If you want engaged employees, trust is vital. You don't have to, like Ashley just said at the keynote, micromanage everyone. As a manager, I need to trust all my colleagues that they're doing the job that they're supposed to. And I do. But I also they need to be able to trust me. I have the power, so I'm probably not the perfect trustee. I would, in any case, say that Vincent is a better one, because he's the powerless one. And like we already said, organizations can have these more engaged employees. Less employees on sick leave, build higher level of trust overall, if you introduce this triangle, the Trinity of Trust in the organization.
And I'm going to stress the one that you mentioned there. One of the things we sometimes hear when we say, yeah, maybe the manager's not the safest one to trust, a response that I often get from the organization is, so how can we improve the trustability of management? And I've even had already 2 managers tell me, you're trying to replace us in that trust in that trust relationship. No, I'm not. I'm trying to work together because they're my colleagues too. So I want a seat at that table. And if something's happening to them, I also care. So I'm not trying to get in between that relationship. I'm trying to work together. That's why I communicate with them and try to give them the information they need to also be a better manager. Something I really want to stress because I've had some trouble with that already. Abide to the airplane rule. Yeah, I think I was pretty clear about that. We are powerless. And I always think that you can always play the game in 2 ways. Either you have the power or you have the influence. I'm in the influence game because people know me, people know what I do, and a lot of people listen to me, but I don't have any mandate. I can't dictate what's happening. I have no role to play in people's salary, employment whatsoever. And finally, and that comes back to the disclaimer that Søren gave, is there might be no one solution to do this, but what we try to do is really convey the concept of a trustee and the concept of how the Trinity of Trust works, and we really hope you learn something from it. Thank you.
Thank you.